But then James Hansen, the chief climatologist for the United States government, told us in Brussels that we had the numbers wrong. He's the head of the NASA Goddard Space Institute. When they look at the geological record, we've never gone over 300 parts carbon per million until the industrial age. We're now at 370. And he said if we mitigate it at 450 parts per million, and I want every parent in this room and every grandparent to listen to this. If we mitigated 450 parts per million mid-century, and no one wants to do that, the chief climatologist of the U.S. government says we go up 6 degrees Celsius in this century, and this is a paraphrase, the end of human civilization, as we've come to know. I hope they're all wrong. My suspicion is it's moving quicker than we think. So Copenhagen broke down. It was a fiasco. It was a charade. And our world leaders came home empty. Even this is the greatest threat we've ever faced in the history of our planet for us. So my question is, what do we do? What do we do? We need a new economic vision. We need an economic game plan that's practical, that's doable, that can be put online as quickly in the developing world as the developed world, and that will get us to a post-carbon age in less than 2 generations. So the first question to ask, how do the great economic revolutions in history occur? They occur when 2 things happen. First, when human beings change the way we organize energy on the planet, and we've had various energy regimes through history. When we create new energy regimes, they make possible more complex civilizations. But then they require a communication revolution to manage them. When communication revolutions converge with energy revolutions, they change the economic era, they change history, and they actually change human consciousness. Example, forage or hunter societies. Energy was the human body. We foraged and we hunted. We created oral language as a communication medium to organize our economy. It changed consciousness. Every forage or hunter society had mythological thinking. They all thought mythologically, every one of them. And in these societies, the basic human drive that solidifies ourselves as a social creature, which is empathy, that's the drive that allows us to socialize and solidify as a social species. Empathy only extended to blood ties. If you were another tribe on the next mountain, you were a non-human. In the great hydraulic agricultural civilization, starting with the Sumerians in Mesopotamia, ancient Iraq, hydraulic centralized agriculture, stored grain became the new energy, full of photosynthesis, rye, wheat, barley. It was so complex, creating these big centralized irrigation agricultural societies, they had to have a communication revolution to manage it, writing it. And we created theological consciousness. All the great religions were formed back then. The Abrahamic religions, Buddhism, etc. And we extended the basic human drive, empathy, from blood ties to religious ties. Now every Jew empathizes with every Jew, every Christian with every Christian, every Muslim with every Muslim, because that's a new fictional family. In the 19th century, first industrial revolution, communication energy comes together. The print technology becomes the medium to organize coal, steam, and rail. Couldn't have done it with oral language. And we extended our consciousness to ideological thinking. And empathy extended again to a new fictional family called the nation state. So now all Italians think of other Italians as a fictional family, and they empathize with Italians, but maybe not Germans. All of a sudden there's something called Germany, it's a fiction, but now all Germans think of other Germans as an extended family and empathize and solidify, but maybe not with the French. So here we are now at the cusp of the second industrial revolution being over. First generation electricity, the telegraph and telephone, converged with oil, the internal combustion engine, and we moved to psychological ways of thinking. We think all therapeutically. Our grandparents thought ideologically. So here's what I'm suggesting. The second industrial revolution, the energies are sunsetting. Does anyone think coal, oil, gas, and uranium are sunrising? The prices are always going to go up, they're never going to go down. And now the entropy bill's going up, up, up. The technologies based on these energies are old, and they've lost their multiplier effect. The infrastructure embedded in these energies is now collapsing. When Chancellor Merkel became Chancellor of Germany, she asked me to come there in the first 2 weeks to help her new government answer the question, how do we grow the German economy? Just what you're doing here this afternoon. And the first question I said to the Chancellor is, Madam Chancellor, how do you grow the German economy, or any economy, in the last stages of a great energy era? Can't be done. We end up all of us fighting for less and less. We are on the cusp of a third industrial revolution. As Antonio said, we are on the cusp. There is a new convergence of communication and energy that has just begun to converge in the last 18 months. We had a powerful communication revolution in the last 15 years, the computer and the internet. This second generation electricity is so different than what I grew up on. I grew up on a telephone, radio, television, centralized, hierarchical, top down. This new internet communication is very different. It's flat, it's distributed, it's collaborative, it's open source, and we got 2 billion people now that can put a little device, 2 billion, in less than 15 years, can put a little device in their hand and send their own video, audio, and text to all the other 2 billion people at the same time with more power than all the television networks in the world. This is what we call distributed collaborative communication. What I'm suggesting to you is that this distributed collaborative communication revolution is now converging with a new energy regime that by its nature is distributed and collaborative. And when the communication manages the energy, we have a third industrial revolution and a shift to biosphere consciousness. From mythological to theological to ideological to psychological, now we begin to think as a biosphere. We don't give up our political ideology, we don't give up our religious sentiments, we don't give up our tribal or family ties, but we embed them in a larger reality. We live in one biosphere, extended family, with our fellow creatures. What are distributed energies? Let me distinguish them from elite energies, which we're very familiar with. Coal, oil, gas, uranium are elite. And the reason they're elite is, chances are, if you go home today, you won't have them in your backyard. They're only found in a few places in the world. They require huge military investments to secure them. Massive geopolitical management to maintain access, and huge amounts of capital to organize them. I don't have to remind you here in Italy how many millions and millions of people have died and been killed in wars to secure coal, oil, gas, and uranium over the past 2 centuries. It is the dark underbelly of a great industrial era. What are distributed energies? They're energies that are found in every square inch of the world, water and land. The sun shines all over the world every day. 1 hour of sun is enough to organize this planet for an entire year. The wind blows across this earth every day. If we harness 20% of it, we'd have enough wind until kingdom comes. Underneath this ground on the planet is a hot geothermal core with more energy than we could ever imagine or ever need. If we live in the rural areas, we have agricultural forestry waste and crop waste converted to energy. Wherever we have small hydro, we have electricity. On the ocean coast, we have the tides and the waves coming in every day. And whenever there's municipal garbage, it can be converted to energy. The sun, the wind, the geothermal, the hydro, the garbage, the waves. These are distributed in every square foot of the world. The European Union made a formal commitment in May of 2007 to a 5-pillar infrastructure for a third industrial revolution. I was privileged to develop that plan for the EU. Let me lay out these 5 pillars and then talk about what's going on here this afternoon, because I think what you're doing here this afternoon may be historic. This may be the implementation phase. Talk is talk, but you have to walk. There are 5 pillars to this third industrial revolution. All 5 pillars must develop at the same time, at the same level, because if one pillar falls behind the others, they all collapse. Together, they create synergies which make them bigger than the sum of the parts. They create a new living infrastructure for a completely new way to visualize the way we live in the 21st century. Pillar 1. The EU has committed itself to 20% renewable energy by 2020. That's a third of the electricity in Europe. And as was previously pointed out, this conversion is going to require millions and millions of jobs. Germany is a good case in point. When Germany put in its feed-in tariff, it moved ahead to 250,000 jobs overnight. And even though that's less than 10% of its energy, it equals all the other jobs and the other 90% of all the energies that exist in the country. This is labor-intensive work to put distributed energy, and it all has to be done local. It can't be exported. Millions and millions and millions of jobs, and thousands of SMEs and co-ops that have to get it organized. And lots of organized labor with the skills to make it happen. Pillar 2. How do we collect this energy? Now, our first thought in Brussels was, okay, well, the Italians, the Greeks, they got a lot of sun down there. The Spain, let's go grab the sun, concentrate it, centralize it, put it in a high voltage line and ship it to everybody else. The Irish seem to have a lot of wind, let's grab it, put a little cable under the channel and ship it out. The Norwegians have the hydro, let's go grab it, centralize it, and give it to everyone else. That was our first thinking. Now, I do not oppose centralized solar, wind, geothermal, and even hydro. They're essential, but they're not sufficient. They're transitional, they're not the third industrial revolution. They will help us get us off carbon, but they are only a small segue to the new era. We began to ask a question in Brussels that now seems so ridiculously simple, but at the time it was an epiphany. We asked the question, if renewable energies are distributed and they're found in every square foot of this planet in some frequency or proportion, why would we only collect them at a few central points? Pillar 2, buildings, buildings, buildings. There are 191 million buildings in the European Union. Every single one of those buildings is going to be converted to a mini power plant in the next 30 years. Every home, every office, every factory, every shopping mall, every rural building, every urban building becomes your personal power plant. Maybe you get 10% of the energy, maybe 20 with geothermal, maybe 30 with wind, maybe 40 with solar. The new buildings, they're going to be positive power from the beginning. Acciona in Spain has a zero-emission building already up. GM in Spain, in Aragon, Spain, at the GM factory, they put it, ask your children and grandchildren. They're coming home from school and they're learning biosphere consciousness. Every single school in Italy, around the world. What they're learning from their teachers, all in the last 5 years, is that everything they do, the electricity their family uses, the car they drive, the food they eat, the clothes they wear, has an ecological footprint, a carbon footprint that affects the ability of some other family to survive somewhere else in the world or some other fellow creature. That's biosphere consciousness. We are becoming connected in our communication energy. We're becoming aware that we're an extended family, and that our family extends well beyond the human race to all of our other fellow creatures who are part of this sojourn called life. I'm not saying there's a blowback. There are different levels of consciousness in the world today. There's still tribal blood wars going on. There are religious wars going on. There's ideological conflict going on. There's therapeutic conflict going on. But now we have to ratchet up the whole human race quickly in 2 generations so we think as a species. How does this affect what you're doing here today? This is the implementation stage. I'm not saying this because I'm here with you this afternoon. If you hadn't done this, somebody else would have had to. What you've done here today, and you know, Angela, you remember years ago I said, I think it's going to be Germany, Spain, and Italy, maybe the UK. Germany's very far ahead on a lot of this. But what's happened here in Italy is you're now moving the economic component of this. Here, over here on this side of the room, is the SMEs of Italy, the co-ops of Italy, the banking community of Italy, consumers, and the trade unions. It's all in one room. This is the force of a third industrial revolution. It's collaborative, that's distributed, and that's lateral. And what you've done today is already rippling out across Europe, as Andre knows. And in Brussels next week, because of what you've done here, the European Parliament, there'll be a meeting. And all of the 5 political parties in the European Parliament that endorsed the third industrial revolution, the center-right, the EPP, Christian Democrats, the Liberals, the Socialists, the Greens, and the parties of the left, will come together with the SMEs of Europe, the cooperatives of Europe, the trade union movement in Europe, the Consumer Association of Europe, and say, we're ready to go for a third industrial revolution. It's because of what you all initiated here 3 months ago. I think we're going to see a domino effect in country after country after country. So, here's the mission. We know the vision, we know the game plan. I don't think there's a plan B. If it is, I haven't heard of plan B. What we need to do now is, it's essential by leadership that this group here began to roll up their sleeves, the trade unions, the co-ops, the SMEs, the banks, the industrial groups with Confindustria, and begin to work together in each region to create master plans, and in each city. So work with government, work with civil society, so we began to actually implement plans over 5, 10, or 15, 20 years to make Italy the flagship for a second Renaissance. You began capitalism in the 14th century. You began the modern experiment with the Renaissance. Make it a second Renaissance. I'm going to leave you with this thought. Consciousness is essential here. It isn't just enough to have the technology and the game plan unless we think the way we think. If we still believe that human nature is selfish and predatory and competitive and utilitarian and pleasure-seeking, as our Enlightenment philosophers said 200 years ago, we're probably doomed. But as Italian scientists showed us in the 1990s with their big breakthrough on mirror neurons, Italian scientists seem to have the big breakthroughs. Electricity in the 19th century, now we've got mirror neurons. Scientists in Parma are now shown that primates, and especially humans, are wired with empathic neurons that are, because we're social, our actual biology predisposes us to experience the other as if we're ourselves, to empathize with another as if it was like us. It's in our wiring. And if we express it, we create a mature civilization. If we repress it, we get the predatory, competitive, violent, utilitarian, secondary behavior. But the worst thing you can do with someone is ostracize them. By nature, we want intimacy. We want connection. We want companionship. We want to tell our story to each other. We want to have a common sojourn. When we don't get it, then we get violent and aggressive. So what I'm suggesting here is there's this chance now with a new technology platform and a new economic vision and game plan that because it's distributed and collaborative and democratic by nature, if we can combine it with biosphere consciousness and extend our empathy across continents and the planet, we may be able to save this species. We may be able to get there in time. I'll leave you with the last thought. How many of, I've said this before, how many have taken your National Geographic DNA test? National Geographic DNA test? Nobody? Well, this is a wild thing. National Geographic magazine has a website. And you can give them $100 and they send you a little biological kit. My wife and I, my in-laws did this. We take DNA out of our cheek and we put it in the kit and send it back to the National Geographic magazine's genetic lab. And at the lab, they analyze our DNA And based on our genetic mutations, they can tell us where my family migrated from, the geography, all the way back to the beginning of history. It's wild. But I'm going to save you all $100. They tell us something else that I apparently didn't know, but it's fascinating. Apparently, 175,000 years ago, in the Rift Valley of Africa, there were about 10,000 anatomically modern humans, us, 10,000 of us. They located one woman. She's a database line for genetics. They call her the mitochondrial DNA Eve. Apparently fairly fertile. All our genes passed to everyone in this room. The other ladies didn't make it. One woman. It gets even more weird. The geneticists tell us that around 70,000 years ago, they found a man. They call him the Y chromosome Adam. Very potent. Apparently his genes passed to everyone in this room today. The other men didn't make it. Here's the news. We all came from two people. The Bible got this one right. Now, we could have come from hundreds, but the point of this story is here we are, one species, common lineage, on this little planet isolated in the universe. We've been sending out radio waves to the universe hoping someone will respond, some form of carrying life. And here on this planet, while we're looking for the rest of the universe for carrying life, we're killing off all the life here. Our fellow creatures, our own species. Something's wrong. We need quickly to change the spirit of the times. We need Italy to flagship this third industrial revolution. And I will say this, and maybe I'm out of line, but if there are those in the way, old institutions, oligarchic energy and electricity companies that are still thinking 19th and 20th century, they've got to get up to speed or we're going to move right by them. There is no time now, if you will, to be lazy or to wait for a miracle. The miracle's here this afternoon in what you put together. So I am hopeful, and I told my wife, what's happened here has made me hope at my age of 65 that this can be done. You now make it happen. Send a message to the world. Thank you.